Hello, and welcome to the Annihilation Droid XRR-3 boss fight guide video. The Annihilation Droid is the first boss in the Eternity Vault operation. The Eternity Vault is the first operation chronologically in the history of Star Wars: The Old Republic. It is also the only operation available at the game's launch, so for many long-time players of the game, usually this is the first boss you'd encounter. Since Eternity Vault itself is generally considered to be the easiest operation, in most cases the Annihilation Droid is kind of many players' introduction to endgame operation in SWTOR. And it's a fun encounter, and hopefully this video will help give everyone some helpful tips on how to clear it very easily. One thing I should say before we dive into the details, there's really not a significant difference between story mode and hard mode, so this walkthrough should be good to cover both versions. The only real difference is there are certain mechanics that hit a little bit harder, so as we go through this we'll talk about that when we get to it. So let's dive in. So the first thing I just want to throw out there as a plug, don't forget to do when you first land down on Belsavis from your escape pods, make sure to go around and get rid of those nasty, filthy tauntauns. We can't be having those. You never know when they're going to come from behind you and stab you in the back. So make sure you clear that area. Fighting the turrets and then the boss has a little bit of danger with it. You don't want a tauntaun to sneak up behind you while you're trying to do that. So watch out. There's, I think, 5 or so down the lower area. There's also one when you get up top that's just to the left of the turrets. Always a good idea to clear those things out before you start. Okay, so before you actually can kill the boss, you first have to kill these 2 turrets. They deal fairly high damage, and it's difficult for one tank to hold aggro on both. So if you're going with a one-tank approach, you want all your DPS to go to the other side and kill the turret first. It's also important that everyone goes together. It's probably a good idea if the healers actually hang back and wait to heal as long as possible, since it can be very easy to pull aggro, and those can nuke you pretty fast, even in story mode. Since a lot of classes that have leaps have a difficult time leaping twice. Most classes can't do that. Usually you leap up top for the first one. You can see there's these little power cells around the perimeter of each of those. You can actually target those as well if you're not able to jump up top and still deal damage, kill the turrets. Once both turrets have been killed, you'll see the boss comes down. Not really sure from where. I guess he's flying around above the Eternity Vault. But anyway, he comes down, and then at this point, you're ready to prepare, and you can actually pull the fight. Okay, so let's talk kind of just as an overview of how this fight works. The XRR droid is honestly fairly easy. There's just a few things you really need to be careful for. There's a little positioning for the tank, which we'll talk about. There's a couple of different stun and knockback mechanics that need to be managed to minimize downtime. Because there's also stuns associated with those and knockbacks that can knock you out of range, so you have to be careful for that. In addition to that, there's a few other mechanics where there's some burst damage phases you need to watch out for, which is the missile salvo mechanic, which we'll talk about. And then at the very end, there is a soft enrage burn phase that, depending on your healers, depending on your group's skill and gearing, can be challenging, particularly in hard mode. Can be somewhat difficult for some groups. Overall, it's a fairly easy fight. Generally speaking, for the entirety of the Eternity Vault, as far as group composition, you really only need one tank. The only thing that might benefit from having a second tank are the turrets. The XRR droid, you really only need one tank. There is a slight chance of somebody else having aggro for a few seconds. That's typically not an issue as long as you know what to watch out for. So one tank, 5 DPS, 2 healers is the typical group composition. If you have a really strong healer, you can probably solo heal this fight on either easily on story mode and probably in hard mode as well. Generally speaking, the DPS check isn't that difficult. The other thing to know for this fight is it kind of functionally serves as the DPS check for the operation. So the enrage timer is 7 minutes. You can technically go into the enrage timer a little bit. It's not an instant wipe. But if you have the DPS to clear this fight in whatever level of difficulty, story mode or hard mode, then you have enough DPS to clear the off. Actually, Eternity Vault's pretty easy in that regard. Only really the first two bosses really have a DPS check. The other 3 are more mechanics based. So anyway, let's dive into the details. Okay guys, so there's really 3 mechanics I want to talk about first that are kind of all in sequence. The first one you're going to see here, we're going to see us pulling a fight here in an example. You're going to see him do a shockwave attack, which is going to stun everyone. You should see it in the middle due to the focus target cast timer. He's going to stun everyone. Then he's going to do an overwhelming swipe, which you should see the cast bar for as well, and which will knock everyone back. So there's the shockwave. He's going to do the overwhelming swipe, which knocks back the tank, and then he's going to do missile salvo. So the way these mechanics work is the shockwave and the overwhelming swipe only affect targets within 20 meters. So your melee DPS and your tank are pretty much going to have to be affected. From a positioning perspective, that means you're going to want your ranged DPS and healers to set up outside of 20 meters for most of the time. That way they don't get affected by the stun or the knockback. The stun actually does more damage than the knockback. It's not typically very sizable damage. Really, the stun and the knockback are a much bigger pain because you lose uptime, which can be dangerous for your healers, and obviously losing uptime for DPS is something you want to avoid if you can. After he does both of those, he's going to do missile salvo, which you saw just a little bit ago, and you're going to see here momentarily again. Missile salvo is a sustained channeled AoE attack that affects everyone in the group. So generally in story mode, it's not that bad. In hard mode, it hits rather hard. So you want to group everyone together for AoE healing to keep everyone up through the phase. The easiest way to do that is you just have everyone group up under the boss, so everyone gets knocked back. In story mode, sometimes it's just the tank. In hard mode, it should be everyone within 20 meters. And then right after the knockback happens, then everyone should, as quickly as they can, run back under the boss, group up under the boss. The boss still takes damage. It doesn't do any single target attacks, so tanks don't necessarily need to worry about taunting. And you can continue to do damage normally. You just group up so that when healers are throwing out those AoE heals, you're getting the maximum possible benefit. One other thing to note that let's show you from another clip. Just one second here. So one little trick you can use to mitigate the knockback if you're a class that has a leap like a Guardian or a Sentinel is as soon as you get stunned, you just start jamming on that button for your leap. And as soon as you get knocked back, right around the time you reach the height of your leap, or the knockback, you'll be able to leap back. We'll see it here in just a second. So boom, leap right back, and you get the uptime, which is really handy, because otherwise you get knocked out of range, and you have to run back into range to leap back, which is always really annoying. So do that if you can. Okay, another mechanic we should talk about is lock-on. This is a mechanic where the boss will target a random player, and will shoot missiles out of its left arm, the big kind of rocket launcher looking arm, dealing single target burst damage to generally a DPS or a healer. This puts in story mode, it doesn't do a whole lot of damage in story mode. In hard mode, it's can tick for around a quarter of your health, which in combination with other abilities can be a little dangerous. So healers should watch out for it. It's one of the relatively few instances where single target burst healing is needed. So we should see this happen here in a second. And there it is right there. Hopefully everyone saw that pretty quick. Okay, here we'll play it again at about 1/4 speed to make it a little easier to see. See the missiles will be kind of headed towards the camera. Usually won't even see this happen, particularly for melee DPS or tanks. You'll just see burst, but just so you can see what's happening. And there we go. Okay, so another mechanic we're going to talk about is, you'll see there, you saw the tank got punted there in the upper left. That's going to happen periodically throughout the fight. I think it's supposed to be called Overwhelming Strike. If you see a cast bar for it, it'll usually also say Overwhelming Swipe. But it's a conal facing the tank, not the group. So the main reason why you want, see there, we get the same thing. That was the normal one, that's 360 degrees. But there will be the tank getting knocked back periodically. That's the main reason why you face them to the door, so you're minimizing the extent to which people get knocked back. If possible, you'll want to aim yourself towards the corner. I'll show you a graphic of that here in just a moment. And then the tank, usually the droid will drop aggro, so the tank needs to get right back into range as quickly as they can in order to taunt back. Usually, periodically throughout the fight, as well as any time he drops aggro, the boss will put out a dot called Carronade. Okay, so here's a screenshot of when I got the debuff from Carronade. It's actually a dot. You can see the little flame dot there in the on the upper right. So that dot typically will go out whenever the tank isn't in a position to taunt back within about a GCD or so. So if they're knocked into out of range, they get stunned. They have to take a GCD to be stunned, and then another GCD or two in order to run or leap or dash back into range, and then they can taunt, or maybe they leap back into range and then taunt. So if you don't do that really, really quickly, you're going to have other members of the team get that dot. Story mode, you probably won't notice it. It's something that healers, particularly in hard mode, should watch out for, because it ticks pretty hard for DPS or healers in hard mode. So if you have a combination of a DPS getting the Carronade dot, and then they also get targeted by lock-on, the combination of those, if they're at, let's say they're around 3/4 health, like you just came out of a missile salvo, and you haven't had a chance to top everyone off, and then both of those hit that player at the same time, that can pretty much wipe out their health. So something for healers especially to watch out for. For DPS in particular, if you see you've got that dot, it's a good time to pop a defensive. Not because the dot itself is that dangerous, but because it can take your health down low enough that and the missile could be pretty dangerous. Okay, just a little bit more to go. Next is Storm Protocol. I believe this is only present in hard mode. You'll hear the boss call it out here momentarily. They're saying he's initiated the Storm Protocol, and he'll target the raid with missiles. They'll place a red circle on the ground, telegraph where they're going to hit. So you have a few seconds to step out of the circle to avoid damage. In story mode, it doesn't take very hard at all. In hard mode, if you take 2 or 3 consecutively, it can wipe out most, if not all, of your health. So you need to move. Ranged heals, a pretty easy time of it. Melee DPS tanks, you need to be a little more careful because there's a lot more noise going on between explosions and fire, all that fun stuff. So just watch your step, and you shouldn't have any problems with this mechanic. It only really becomes real problematic if you have a lot of melee and tanks, where you have to be a little nervous about not only stepping out of your red circles, but making sure you don't step into anyone else's.
Systems failing.
Okay guys, thanks for hanging in there. One last thing, and then we'll talk about the overall strategy. So once the boss gets to around 8 or 9%, they'll start the burn phase, or the soft enrage. They'll do one more cycle of shockwave, which is the AoE stun, the overwhelming swipe, which is the knockback, and then they'll channel missile salvo. Unlike in previous instances of this during the fight, they'll continue channeling that forever until the boss is dead. In hard mode in particular, this is a fairly tight AoE burn phase, so just pop your defenses, hit your raid buffs, your adrenals, your slinger bubbles, and just kill them. Usually dies at about 1%. So for those that like having diagrams and charts to help understand, here's a graphic I put together to help simplify and hopefully put all this together into a cohesive strategy. So again, the boss doesn't move, so you're going to have your tank on one side facing the door. You'll have your melee DPS behind them. If at all possible, you want the tank and the melee DPS to be situated in such a way that all of them or most of them are knocked back at a diagonal. For the tank, this is important for when they're knocked back individually so that they can get back into range and get aggro, so that the Carronade dot goes on them instead of somebody else to minimize damage. If they're knocked back into the columns in the corner, they generally will not be out of taunt range. So they, as soon as they land and the stun wears off, they can hit their taunt, grab aggro right back, and then they can leap or run in or whatever, and they keep most of the damage on them as you'd want. For the DPS, it's more of if you don't have a leap and you can't cheese the knockback by jamming on your leap button. For everyone else, if you can angle yourself, it's a little trickier to do than for the tanks, but if you can angle yourself where you're knocked back into those turret pillars, then you'll be a lot closer. You'll be knocked back about 20 to 25 meters, so you'll still be within range of certain abilities. Otherwise, you're going to be knocked back like 40, 45 meters, as you may have seen from some of the clips, and you'll waste a few GCDs running back into range, maybe even more if you don't have a gap closer available. And then your ranged DPS and healers are going to stay outside of 20 meters so they don't get hit by the stun or the knockback. Anytime missile salvo happens, so after the shockwave and the overwhelming swipe, everyone's going to run in. As you see the arrows pointing to the droid, everyone stacks into the middle for AoE healing. And then after that finishes, everyone runs back out to resume their normal positions. And then if storm protocol happens, you just step outside of red circles. And then at the very end, when it hits the burn phase, same rules apply for missile salvo. Everyone gets under the boss. You cuddle up for AoE healing, and then you just burn him until he's done. All right, thanks everyone for watching this video. I hope this has been helpful. Again, the XRR-3 droid is a fairly easy boss fight, but if this is your first time doing ops, it can feel a lot more challenging, and I think it's a fun fight. I really enjoy EV quite a bit, so I enjoy running Eternity Vault anytime I can, especially with newer players. So here's just a kill video in its entirety. There's a story mode kill, although again, mechanics are substantially the same in hard mode. So enjoy, hope this is helpful. Thanks very much, and good luck in all your gaming and so forth.
I have been armed with 24 distinct weapons technologies. Proximity violation. Proximity violation. I have been armed with 24 distinct weapons technologies. Tactics analyzed. Engaging storm protocols. Proximity violation. I have been armed with 24 distinct weapons technologies. Warning, system failing.